You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
We are going to be reviewing specific, undiagnosed symptoms of heavy metal toxicity. And the reason why I say specific is that a lot of times, at least in the natural health world, we seem to pin things on heavy metals when we don't know necessarily if that's exactly what they are. It's kind of like what conventional medicine does with Lyme-based disease. They say, okay, well, it's probably Lyme. And the problem is then you have people oftentimes searching for a cure to Lyme, to figure out what it is to fix their Lyme disease, in air quotes. Well, the same can be said for heavy metals. But here's the problem. People really do get Lyme disease, and they really do suffer from debilitating flu-like symptoms, joint pain, and many other issues. Never mind the mitochondrial issues they end up having months down the road, even after the Lyme has gone away. So here's what I want to talk about. The same exact thing happens for heavy metal issues. So what we have is a twofold issue. One, how do we eliminate a lot of these heavy metals that we're exposed to? And the second part is, how do we even ensure that we don't have them, right? Because they can show up as a host of symptoms in the body. So what I'd like to go through is, first, common exposure. For you, your family, your loved ones, what to watch for. How to replace the simple things like light bulbs in your home to make sure that they're mercury-free. Believe it or not, a lot of the new so-called smart light bulbs are loaded with mercury. So much so that if you don't leave the house when one breaks, it can be poisonous. So I want to go over that today. Again, not to scare you, but the world around us can sometimes be a pretty treacherous place. So let's protect our house. Let's make sure we have safe things in it. Then let's look at common symptoms. If you're already suffering from the all too common heavy metal, what's called toxic body burden, meaning an overload that's accumulated not from one dosage, not from a light bulb breaking or a thermometer breaking when you were younger, but actually from 2 decades of accumulation. All right? And then we'll talk about if you'd like to test for it, if you want to do a heavy metal protocol, or if you simply want to include heavy metal detoxing foods in your life. And we'll go over those too. So we'll always give you plenty of options on the show. But let's take it from the top. So one of the biggest things to understand is that heavy metals, like everything in terms of natural health, as long as it's from a science-based perspective, these things aren't made up. Like, no one is doing this in the natural health field to scare you. They're doing things to say, listen, we need to take notice of what is going on in our environment, because our environment really is turning into a pretty scary place. And that's because if we look at it, it is our soil, it's our water, and the air we breathe that we're being exposed to these toxins. Now, I've talked about phthalates and volatile organic compounds and all sorts of things in the past. Today, let's specifically talk about heavy metals. And I'm really going to focus on these things that are focused in the water, soil, where your food is grown, water, where you drink from and swim in and shower in, and then also what we spoke about as well, the air that we breathe. Okay, we're so in thickly or densely populated areas, less so, most likely, but not always, especially if you're around a large agricultural-based farm, then it's oftentimes less. So the four that we're going to focus on the most, because you're going to see them the most, are mercury, lead, cadmium, and arsenic. But there'll be one more that I add, and because simply it's so pervasive in the environment, and that's aluminum. I would say that it's the most well-known, so I don't always give it as much talk as it deserves. But I can tell you this, 9 out of 10 people are coming up high with at least some level of aluminum on a hair tissue mineral analysis, on a minerals and metals test. 9 out of 10 people. And the reason is that, and it did a show in this, so I don't want to go too deep into aluminum today. Certainly, I can link up that show. Today's podcast and show notes will be at stevencabral.com/1455. So you can head right over there and we'll link up everything that you need right there. So what I want to talk about, though, are these, we'll call them big five. The mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic, aluminum. And we find these a lot of times because of industrial-based waste, industrial-based use. All of these compounds are being spewed up into the atmosphere, and they're raining down on the ocean, they're raining down on soils, and they're in the air we breathe. It's as simply put as that. Let's look at this alone. Just some easy statistics. And again, in my opinion, this is pretty scary. So even in small amounts, we know that mercury is toxic, right? And that's why it's pretty scary that they put it in our mouths. I mean, they say, well, it's set, it's not going anywhere. Well, here's the thing. It's not going anywhere for a few years. It's going somewhere when you first put it in, when it's a liquid. It's also going somewhere as it starts to upturn on the edges, and every time you chew, you get little microdoses of mercury. But the other thing is this. 50 tons of mercury is being released into the air on an annual basis. That's 100,000 pounds every single year in the United States. And this is just from coal and coal-fired power plants. So when we talk about saving the environment, we really do mean it. A lot of that is not made up. We are destroying our environment. We're destroying our oceans and fish. And even organic, healthy plants are being rained down on with mercury, lead, all sorts of other compounds in the ground. So, and again, you can check out the World Health Organization for most up-to-date stats, and you'll be able to find a lot more information there as well. Again, that's called the World Health Organization. The United States will try to bury this, but the World Health, WHO, will bring it more to your attention. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about lead. Now, lead, no doubt about it, is the biggest cases come from lead paint-based exposure, older homes, but there's also, there was lead formerly used in pipes, so older pipes will have lead, and those still run all over the country. There's no doubt about it. And there's also lead in many children's toys that come from overseas, and in our soil and water as well from contamination. Cadmium, when I think cadmium, I always think tobacco smoking, cigarette exposure. That's a big one. There's no doubt about it. But there's also from rice, contaminated water, which the rice is grown in, and that is brought into the food supply as well. Cadmium, I won't talk about it too much on today's show, but it's a really dangerous one if you have Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. So you want to, again, keep that in mind. Arsenic, we get this from cigarette smoke. We get this from, believe it or not, all sorts of different pressure-treated woods that we build our home with. We get it from big farming runoff that, again, goes into the soil. It's a huge issue, causes lung-based issues, can cause diabetes. I'm going to get into more of the heavy-based things in a second, but then I'm going to get into the overall symptoms that aren't necessarily diagnosed disease, but actual health concerns that we need to be worried about. And aluminum is one of the worst for neurological-based issues and potentially Alzheimer's as well. One more thing I want to bring up, and I will go through those specific symptoms, is that in a higher dosage, people can actually get heavy metal poisoning. This is different. Think of it like this. If you were allergic to peanuts, you would have a massive reaction. Okay. If you have a food sensitivity, well, you build up inflammation over time. Same exact thing. Big exposure to chemicals like pesticides, etc., then big symptoms right away, potentially life-threatening. But small exposure over time, it builds up, still causes damage, potentially cancer. So big dosage of heavy metals from mercury, you'd start to get muscle weakness, slurring of speech, hands are trembling, vision issues, trouble walking, loss of coordination. A lot of these are going to affect the nervous system, but if we get lead exposure, okay, you'll see irritability, you'll see some more aggression, you'll see headaches, fatigue, memory loss, developmental skills in children, high blood pressure in adults. You might see sleep issues. Constipation can even be one from lead. Okay, another one. Let's look at arsenic. Acute exposure. Issues with arrhythmias with the heart, muscle cramping, spots on the skin that look like warts or lesions. Again, these appear after an exposure. Red or swollen skin, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Last one, cadmium. Oftentimes a fever, some muscle pain, breathing problems. If you ever experience any of these and you think you've been exposed to, or a child has been exposed to, a heavy metal, lead paint, a new toy, drinking water from a strange place like that you don't know, whatever it might be, do get help. Those are acute-based signs. There's something really wrong. But now let's go into something that's a little bit more pervasive in our environment, is trying to figure out, why do we have these underlying symptoms? Why do we have more of the issues of frequent headaches, infertility, anxiety, feelings of depression, your eye health is beginning to deteriorate, issues with your immune system, meaning like you just keep getting recurrent immune issues or really feeling run down. Tingling sensations. People ask me all the time, why do I get tingling in my hands and feet? Or sometimes even around the mouth. And yes, it can be with blood sugar. It can be with B vitamins. It could be with neuropathy. It can be impingement in like the cervical vertebrae. It could be impingement with the piriformis. Like there's issues it can be. But no doubt about it, heavy metals cause free radical damage in the body, which absolutely targets and affects the nervous system. So don't overlook this. Kidney issues, without a doubt. Memory problems, headaches I mentioned, shaking of the hands, that's different than the tingling, but any shaking of the extremities, I would absolutely look right away towards heavy metals. And one that you might not think about, but is also digestive issues. Now, talked about this before, but one of the reasons why a lot of people are getting the results they want, if they're doing something they say that's like the CBO protocol, but isn't the CBO protocol for their gut issues, they're not using a biofilm disruptor. Heavy metals can accumulate in your gut, causing systemic, well, I shouldn't say systemic, I should say constant inflammation in the gut from your body trying to rid that, as well as those heavy metals being used as part of the biofilm to protect parasites, bacteria, or candida. So I simply want you to take a note of that. Fertility-based issues, brain fog, anxiety, depression, deteriorating eye or vision-based issues, kidney issues, digestive issues, poor immune function, tingling in the hands and feet, memory problems, infertility, I believe I named, and again, trembling, shaking of the hands is one of the main ones. Slurred speech, but again, that would happen slowly over time for this gradual-based accumulation. These are really important to look at. Now, remember, there are multiple causal factors for any of the things that I named. There's no doubt about it. We can have memory problems because of high levels of cortisol and stress. Infertility, the same thing. We could have brain fog, the same thing. We could have low thyroid, could explain a lot of these. So I'm not saying that heavy metals are the end-all, be-all. I would actually like to take a more balanced approach to this and say that heavy metals are oftentimes, and very oftentimes, a part of the overall wellness-based equation when someone's never been able to figure out why they can't get well, lose the weight, or they just feel themselves aging at a more rapid rate. So that's how I tend to look at these things. Now, what can we do? Well, our best bet is this. When we look at water, remember, we're going to look at water, we're going to look at food, and we're going to look at the environment. So when I look at water, I say this. I want to buy bottled spring water, ideally in a glass. And if I can't do that, and I can't fill it up at the spring itself, and I don't know that it's clean, well then, I'm going to do the next best thing, and I really believe, I don't work for Berkey, but we'll link it up here again today. You can always go to my website on the review I did, but buy the best water filter available. So buy something that takes all of the junk out of the water. We use a Berkey, but you could use a big reverse osmosis treatment system for the whole house. You could add your minerals back in. You could restructure the water, whatever you'd like. I'm going to be talking about a nice little device that helps actually with restructuring water, and that does kill a lot of the viruses, mold, fungi in the water, but it's not going to help as much with the heavy metals, okay? So I still believe your water should be filtered or from a spring, which is going to be Probably the most structured out of all of them, the most balanced out of all. Okay, so that's our water filter. We just need good, clean water. Same with the shower filter. You can go to stevencabral.com/podcasts, type in shower filter, type in bath filter, type in water filter, and you will see every time I reviewed one, and you'll see my highest recommendation. So always feel that you can go to stevencabral.com/podcasts, type in any keyword search you want. There's now today is 1,455, so there's a lot of shows to search through. And then you can always go to cabralsupportgroup.com and just say to the community, hey, what's your favorite water filter? What's your favorite bath filter? What's your favorite spring water? And then name your favorite or wherever you live. And I've gone through that before too. I even tell you on a podcast how to find a spring. I think it's literally called findaspring.org. I have no idea if that's correct. Let me see if I can type that into my computer. Findaspring.org. And as that's popping up, I don't know that it will. And yes, findaspring.org. I don't know if that's the correct one. I did a whole podcast on that, but I believe that's it. Findaspring.com now. All right. Well, they must have got the .com. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is move over to the food. I've drawn a line in the sand. Use the Dirty Dozen food list. Okay. So there's the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. Again, you could search that on my podcast page. But there are a group of foods called the Clean 15. If you can't buy organic, if you can't buy all organic, you'll buy those ones conventional. Okay. And you'll just use a vinegar-based solution. And apple cider vinegar is a good one. Dilute that with water, put it in a bowl, let it soak. Scrub the outside of the skin as needed. Okay, you'll do a soak. You can do this also for organic-based foods as well. We do it for strawberries. We do it for other foods that still have organic pesticides on them. Okay, but for the Dirty Dozen, you just won't purchase those. You won't purchase them. You won't eat them if they're not organic. So that means your beloved strawberries, if you find them and they say conventional and they don't say organic, or you can't trust that grocery food store, wherever it is, you don't buy them. Because the amount of pesticides on there, I should say the benefit of the strawberry does not outweigh the pesticides that are loaded on that. They don't. Your liver is going to be working overtime. You're going to be dealing with, there are metals in that pesticide spray too. So please, protect yourself, protect your family. Do not eat those foods. You really can't. And you can just check out the Dirty Dozen, Clean 15. I stand nothing to gain by promoting the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. I don't, right? But this is done by the Environmental Working Group, and they're a nonprofit. So, okay. Now, the last part is this. The air that we breathe. My opinion is also this. I live in the city. I have such mixed feelings on this. I love living in the city. I have everything within walking distance. I don't have to take a car anywhere. It's fantastically convenient. I can walk my girls to school in the morning. Like, life is convenient in the city, but it comes at a cost. And that cost is clean air. So here's what I do. I really do wish that I lived outside the city. I value that clean air. But as of right now, there are trade-offs that you make in life. That's one of the trade-offs that we've made for right now. So what we do is get a really good air purifier that can filter the whole house or put them in each individual room. And I have other technology as well that I'll be sharing with you over the next couple weeks that will also help with this. I did a podcast review on air filters. You can go to stevencabral.com/podcasts and type in air filter. I have used many air filters over the years. I've used the Allen. It's excellent. I've used the IQ Air. It's the best. It's top of the line. It's the one that my family and I use, but you can use any one of those filters, and they all do, the ones that I rated, all do a good job. They really do. So from $100 or so all the way up to maybe $800 for like the commercial use that they use in hospitals. So choose the one that's best for you. Now, this air filter will last you, a decade. There's no doubt about it. You'll change your filters every 6 months, but it will last you a good decade. There's no doubt about it. Probably longer. Okay. I feel like I'm saying no doubt about it a lot on today's show. All right. So we need clean air to breathe. Those three things are huge for being able to remove those metals. Okay. Now, foods that you can eat. Okay. Spirulina is a great one. Cabral chlorella, cilantro, parsley, any type of algae, anything that's a natural cleaner is going to help with those heavy metals as well. Then cruciferous-based vegetables, as always, are going to help with more of that detoxification. They're not the binders, but they'll help with the removal. Of course, doing a functional medicine detox every 12 weeks, every season is a must, just to keep up with toxins in your body, not just heavy metals. And then also annually, I recommend a heavy metal detox. Check out the heavy metal detox that I went through in the podcast as well. It goes through a 6-week protocol that it was proven to naturally, no harsh chelation, but naturally get rid of over 90% of the heavy metals. And that was in just 6 weeks. So what was it? Cabral chlorella, cilantro, vitamin C, and we add a biofilm disruptor. So you can definitely check that out. And we have that over at equilibriumnutrition.com for your convenience. They are not Equilibrium Nutrition brands for the most part, but we put together my bundle according to the research and also the instructions on how to do it. Okay, so that is that. Those are things that I highly recommend. I do a heavy metal detox once a year, and also, of course, I run my labs. There are two main labs that you can run. The first one is the hair tissue mineral analysis, also called the metals and minerals test. And the second one is one that we just came out with that we're very proud of, because this is one that we've been using in our Boston-based practice for quite some time. And here's how we do it. So the hair tissue mineral analysis, the minerals and metals test, is something that we've been using for, we're talking years and years and years and years. It's one that I did over 20 years ago. It's amazing, again, that I get to offer that. Well, and that will give you a good long-standing look at the metals that you've been excreting. For sure, run that, and it's part of the starter kit as well. It's part of the Big Five. Now, we came up with a new test, not new to the world. It's not even new to our practice, but it's new to Equilibrium Nutrition because we want to continue to offer you the best of the best. This one allows you to actually look at your heavy metals at a blood-based level, like a true toxicity level, as well as what's being excreted in your body on a daily basis in the urine. Really powerful test, okay? Overall, not as expensive, which is nice, and it enables you to look at your main metals. So I've gone through that, kind of chatted about it before, but what I'd like to do is just share with you. It's going to go through some positive metals. It's going to go through some good ones like zinc and copper. We want to make sure copper is not too high though. Magnesium and selenium. Great. So we look at that. And then we also look at iodine and we look at selenium again in the urine. Those are important. But then we're going to be looking at lead, cadmium, and mercury in the blood. Now, when I say blood, it's just a finger prick, so it's not like a big blood work-based test. You can do this at home for yourself or your kids, no problem at all. Skin rash is another one that we test for heavy metals all the time for children and adults. Okay, then it's going to look at bromine, which we didn't even talk about. It's going to look at arsenic, cadmium, mercury for the urine-based of what the body's excreting. So basically, what's in the blood and what is the body excreting through the kidneys and urine on a daily basis. This tells you if you're getting daily exposure versus longer-term exposure of what the hair tissue mineral analysis does. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you for tuning into today's podcast. As always, I appreciate you. If you ever have any questions, feel free to let them go at cabralsupportgroup.com. We're happy to answer them there. And of course, you can email us at support@equilibriumnutrition.com. Thank you for your time. Have an amazing day. I appreciate you. Please do feel free to share the show with anyone you believe it could serve. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only two ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.